Well, sitting behind me is one of the latest V8TV long-term projects. It's a 1971 Oldsmobile Cutlass S. The original owner had ordered this car wanting a 442. Now the 442 was the hottest Olds you could buy back in 70, 71. And the 442 came with a 455 Oldsmobile under the hood, and it had a stripe package and bucket seats, and you could get it with a 4-speed. A positive traction rear end and all kinds of cool go fast stuff. Well, the problem was the guy who bought this car couldn't afford an Olds 442, so he decided to take the base model Oldsmobile and add a bunch of options to it and effectively create as much of a 442 as he could afford. He did a pretty good job, but he had to stop just short of the motor. So what we're looking at is a 1971 Olds Cutlass S with an outside air induction fiberglass hood, a 4-speed, bucket seats, FE2 sport suspension, front disc brakes, sway bars all the way around, box lower rear control arms, heavy duty cooling, power steering, air conditioning delete car, but it only has a 350 Olds and a 4-barrel. So I mean, it's like 90% of a 442, but it doesn't have the hot motor. So it kind of has brakes. It makes it kind of an interesting car in that respect, that it was a special order vehicle. The other thing that makes it interesting is that what you're looking at is factory paint. This is all GM paint except for the hood. And the story on it is, you can see like here on the corner, it's got kind of a crappy tape job, and this corner doesn't really match this one very well. And the story was, the original owner told us that he ordered the car with this hood and the stripe, this Viking blue and white combination, and he wasn't happy with the way the stripes were painted from the factory. So he had the dealership repaint the stripes, I think a couple times, and this is as good as they got it. But it was never damaged or wrecked, and this is the correct hood for the car. One thing that's interesting, if you're going to find a car like this and it's got a fiberglass hood on it, the way to tell if it's a GM hood or not is the GM ones were fiberglass on the outside, but this structure on the inside is all metal. You can see this one's steel and it's starting to get a little bit rusty. We're going to definitely restore this original hood because these are getting hard to find. Again, if this was a 69 Trans Am, this would be like a $10,000 hood, but it's not. The quarter panels are kind of rusty, the outside edges of the trunk floor, and the back sides of the front fenders have holes in them. And this is all very typical. These cars used to like to collect leaves and stuff down in the areas behind the fenders, and that held moisture, and that means they rusted. It came with the FE2 sport suspension package, which included these boxed lower rear control arms and a factory rear sway bar, and also these upper supports to keep the control arm mounts in place. And then the rear axle is a 10-bolt GM G92 code. It's a 342 posi rear axle, as evidenced by the original posi tag. The floors are in surprisingly good shape. We did a quick little preliminary scrape here on the the floorboard on the low spot where normally these things rust through, and you've got original undercoating and then original paint right underneath. So I don't think we're going to have to do a lot of floor replacement on this car. I know we're going to have to do some work in the trunk and the wheel well area, but the rest of the tub seems okay. The Oldsmobile FE2 front suspension package consisted of the sway bar, some heavy-duty springs, specially valved shocks, which in this case have been replaced with some cool Midas units, but I actually thought those rode pretty well. Even though this thing hasn't been driven since probably about 1988, it actually drives very well. It's kind of windy with no windshield. And then it's got a factory front disc brake setup and a set of 14-inch super stock 2 wheels. Interestingly enough, these wheels are gray, and they were painted gray from the factory. I think you could get them in body color if you wanted to, but the base super stock wheel was gray, and this car has all 5 of them. Everything the car came with, we have. And if you look at this air cleaner, it has this, well, it's kind of taken apart right now. It's got this flapper door that would activate when you step on the gas, and then you've got a traditional style air filter underneath. And this is an original one. You can buy reproductions. Just that lid alone on a reproduction is like $600 bucks. So that's kind of a score that it's got it. So the question has to be asked, I mean, what are we going to do with this car? We're not necessarily all about concourse restorations in this shop. We usually modify stuff and make things perform better than they did when they were new. But at the same time, this car is kind of an oddball. It was special ordered, and to the right Oldsmobile collector, it's got some significance. So if this was a 442 and this was a 455 with a factory 4-speed and buckets and all that stuff, it would be a super rare car. It's all numbers matching, it's got all the right stuff. But it's not. It's a 350 car. So in some ways it's kind of a letdown, but in other ways, I guess to a collector, there's probably, the one Oldsmobile guy in the world who thinks this is the greatest car ever. So we just wanted to enhance the original factory appearance. So we contacted our buddy Ben Hermance at Hermance Design, who's kind of turning into our in-house designer. And he took an existing Oldsmobile rendering that he had for a different project and just kind of tweaked it to fit our car. So again, it's Viking blue. We've added the stock Oldsmobile 442 stripes down the side, changed the wheels a little bit, and we've called this car the S71. After all, it's an Olds Cutlass S and it's a 1971. And it seems like everything has to have a name now, so that's a nice easy one to remember. But to make some power, we can upgrade this Olds 350 with some modern technology, and we're thinking about putting a single turbocharger on the car and letting it breathe right through the carburetor, because we'll be able to double the horsepower of the car. It'll still be smooth and quiet to drive, and it'll be completely reversible. So if a collector really wanted this car, all you'd have to do is remove the turbo system, we're going to keep the carburetor, and it'll be completely stock under the hood. So we're doing a little double duty. As we take the original pieces off, even if we're not going to reuse them, we're going to restore them and keep them with the car, but we're going to make some performance enhancements along the way as well. And then our friends at Year One are going to help us with some of the body panels and the interior restoration parts. And with the help of S&K Tools, we should be able to wrench this thing apart and put it back together and make it look kind of unassuming and still keep that original flair, but it should be a pretty trick car when it's all said and done. So you're going to want to keep watching V8TV to see this one transform, and we're going to be posting blogs along the way on the website, V8TVshow.com.